Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, May 20th, 2024 at 7 p.m. And we have a number of items on our agenda tonight prior to our regular session meeting. The first is a public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant Program. And this is the second hearing. The City of Athens intends to apply to the Ohio Development Services Agency for funding under the CDBG program, which is a federally funded program administered by the state of Ohio. And there's a lot of different ways that the CDBG program funds can be used. We are eligible in fiscal year 24 for approximately $150,000. On April 15th, we had our first public hearing to inform the public about the program, how the money can be used and what activities are available or eligible. And based on both citizen input and local officials' assessment of what the city needs, the City of Athens is proposing to undertake the following activities for program year 2024, West Side Sidewalks. Tonight is the second of two public hearings, and we are interested from any citizens who would like to provide their input on the city's plans for the CDBG program. So if anyone is here tonight to talk about the CDBG program, this is a public hearing and we'd like to hear from you. Please come forward and give us your name and your address and what your comments are on the CDBG program. Seeing no public comments, Mayor, anything to add about the second hearing tonight?
West Side Sidewalks.
Sidewalks, sounds good. I'm sure you have plenty of support for that. Okay, we'll call the, Solveig, I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you. Representing the West Side, I think that I just like to say, and having been on the Pedestrian Accessibility Committee a couple of years ago, is it that long? Anyway, I am so pleased that the discussion of sidewalks is about the West Side, because one of the first things that I heard when I was on council was emails from people saying our sidewalks are a mess. So I think there's great interest in making sure that we can clean them up and make them pedestrian accessible to everybody, and thank you very much.
Excellent. Any other comments from anyone? Yes.
When I was on council previously as well, I was advocating for sidewalks to be improved all over town, and having these improved on the west side is a really good start. And I know that quite a few of the sidewalks on the west side need some improvement, so I hope this money will stretch as far as possible.
Thank you, Member Clodfelter. Any other comments tonight? Okay, we will close the public hearing on the CDBG, and I appreciate your comments. The second item on the agenda tonight is actually a Planning and Development Committee. We only have one item on that agenda, and I will go ahead and ask council to stay at the dais, but I'll turn things over to the Planning and Development Committee Chair, Member Swank, who is joined by Jessica Thomas, Solveig Spionis, and Michael Wood. Member Swank?
Thank you, sir. Nice to keep everybody up here. Don't have to play musical chairs for one item.
Sure.
Woods Edge, where is it? If you go to University Estates, go up the main road, past all the first round of houses. At the very end, make a left, go past the first street on your left. It's that area in front of you at that point in time, because the roads curve around out there. I'm not sure if you're going east or west, but that's where it's located. We started this process back, the previous council started this back in 2020 with an ordinance authorizing a tax increment financing agreement, a TIF for that area, wherein the developer would put in the infrastructure and then through the TIF tax credit program be reimbursed for that. Well, as we all know, in 2020, COVID kind of threw all of us a curveball, and the things kind of got off the rails by nobody's fault. Well, it came back and they wanted to proceed with it last year, only to find that, as we all know, building costs, infrastructure costs, and the like had skyrocketed to the point that the developers would not be able to do this and recoup their investment. In fact, they would have ended up doing the infrastructure at a loss. So we kind of, as a council, just put it on the back burner. I'm not exactly sure who came up with the idea, but the current idea is rather than the developer being the TIF recipient, the city would. In other words, the city, you and I, all the taxpayers in Athens, would put up the money, not out of the general fund, but out of a couple of funds that we have, which are very, very healthy. One would be the street fund, three in particular, the street fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. We would build the infrastructure, not literally, but with our dollars. And then as this is built out, the money would come back to the city. This would allow the developer to put in the housing that we so badly need. The housing we're talking about has already been designed to a preliminary stage, and we're looking at housing in the neighborhood of 200,000 to 300,000 in that niche. These are townhouses, some 2-bedroom, some 3-bedroom, and housing that would be accessible. We often use the term universal design, but we're talking about accessible, wider doorways and the like. The money would come from the street fund, $700,000, $675,000 from the water fund, and $625,000 from the sewer fund. We've done a very good job as a city managing those funds so that we have, I won't call it an excess, but we have a balance for things like this that come up. And as many of you know, housing is in great demand in the city. There's a house on Grand Park 2 streets over from me, went on the market on Saturday. On Monday, the sign said, under contract. That's how quickly they go. And we're really lacking housing in this $200,000 to $300,000 range. These are all 2-story houses, and they're set up in a townhouse format. I've talked with John Wharton, the realtor of record for that area, and I've also talked with Brett Howard, one of the 2 principals in the development of this at great length. And nothing has really changed in terms of what they would like to do, other than the fact we would be switching the TIF. This is going to require 2 ordinances, one that we're going to talk about this evening and bring forward for first reading, and secondly, one that will amend the original TIF. The first one tonight would be an ordinance to authorize the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids to get the ball rolling. With our break in July, we're actually giving him a 2-month head start on this. One of the caveats of this will be that the Service Safety Director shall not award a contract for said infrastructure construction until City Council has adopted an amended TIF agreement. That's going to take work with the auditor's office, certainly with the law director's office. We won't need bond counsel on this, I don't think, but there are some I's to dot and T's to cross. The plan will be to take that up right after our break through the normal 3-reading process. This is a big deal. This is housing. This is something that we badly need, and we don't need to really rush it through because we would like significant community input, particularly from the Housing Commission that Member Spelness coordinates. And in fact, we're hoping that in June, Director Stone could meet with that group to further explain what all of this is from a housing standpoint, because we do have some new members on that commission, one of which I see tonight. Mary Abel is with us. So that's what we're talking about. Do you have that document we were going to give people?
Yes.
Okay. And I must say, Clerk Walker has, I won't say thrown this together, but tied it all together in the last 36 hours while the rest of us were doing whatever we're doing on the weekend. For some reason, she's checking her email, and by noon today had this document ready for us. So it's short and sweet. Take a look at it, and I will open it up to members of the committee for comment, questions, and then we'll have the mayor weigh in with any additional details that he feels appropriate, and you can direct any questions to him also. So members of the committee, yes.
I'd just like to say that I know a lot of people are eagerly awaiting this to be built. I know that there were a lot of people who had already put money down when they pulled it. and I'm sure would be happy to put their money down again. I personally have friends who have wanted to put money down and didn't have that opportunity. And this seems like a good solution to help this go forward, given the complications in terms of prices have gone up. I guess there's a couple things that do concern me a little bit. How do we make sure, and I think we're going to talk about that later, but I think it needs to be said, how are we going to make sure that if we put this infrastructure in, that it's going to be built, since they pulled it once already? The other thought I had was, would builders be uncomfortable with bidding, knowing that there's a second step of having to pass the TIF again? Would that be a deterrent at all? So, I don't know, maybe it's not at all, but I'm throwing it out there.
On your first point in talking to Director Stone, there are three things that he would like to see put in place. The first two, it appears that the developers have agreed to without any issues at all. Number one would be a life insurance policy on each of them, substantial life insurance policy to address the point about the city getting its money back. Second point has to deal with the city's right of first refusal or first purchase should this thing not get built, that we could actually purchase the land. We would have the land, and then we could determine what we wanted to do with it in terms of housing. I'm not going to say anything else. I'd say a golf course. The next thing you know, it's going to be on the front page of the paper. We're building a golf course. So I won't say that. But the city would have the right of first refusal or first purchase. The third thing they're still working on, and this will come in the second ordinance that we'll talk about either in June or right after the break, and that is service fees on a schedule, payments, so that we're not out this $2 million forever. And that's the one thing they're going to need to work. This is a new concept where the city becomes the TIF recipient as opposed to a private developer. Yes, Jessica.
Does the developer have an anticipated timeline? I saw phases mentioned. Do they know about how long they think this will take, start to finish?
Brett did not give a timeline, but he said as soon as this is passed, the trucks will be rolling tomorrow, or the next day. I mean, not tomorrow literally, but literally the next day. They're ready to go. They were ready to go before, but the almost doubling in cost to put in the infrastructure really through what I guess could be considered in the building world a small business. This is an MI Homes or Schottenstein's or one of those. This is a small local construction company. But yeah, as soon as we pass the second ordinance, they're ready to go.
Okay.
And they'll build it on a rolling basis. Yeah, follow-up question?
Yeah. I also noticed in the correspondence for Director Stone, he asked about if they're no longer on the hook for infrastructure cost, would that lower the unit costs to make it more affordable than attainable?
When I talked to Director Stone on Thursday or Friday, that is something they're going to try to negotiate so that when he comes to us, he'll have a complete package. In my conversation with Brett today, he's a businessman and he would like to make some money, but he says, I'm not trying to make a killing here. Yes. Beth.
Maybe you said this, but does the developer have an idea of how many units will be going in?
I've seen anywhere from 37 to 51. The mayor's nodding his head here. He probably has a good number for us.
Potentially 42.
Okay. That will be helpful for the housing situation.
And here's something that Brett and I talked about today. One hope for some people would be that people who already live in town move there, even though that is in town, which would then free up a lot of single-family homes closer in, which are in great demand. Although we're not putting up the fences around the city and saying if you live somewhere else, don't come. We'd certainly like those people too. But this could very well start a ripple effect. And 42 units, that's a lot of houses. I don't know, so you live in University Estates, are there 42 houses up there? Not counting the second phase.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I should know that number, but I don't really. I
Okay.
think so, though.
Yeah, I've never counted, but.
Yeah, me neither.
Essentially, other than that newest phase, doubling the housing stock in that area. Other questions from the committee? Yes, sir.
Yeah, what kind of guarantees do we have as far as, I mean, I see the question from Andy about guarantees of completion. I don't see any clawbacks on the fund or any clawbacks should this not be completed in appropriate time?
Those were the three things we talked about. Heaven forbid, but a death we covered by the life insurance. Secondly, if it doesn't go, we have the right of first purchase on the land. And third would be the service fees, and they have not worked out the language with the law director and attorneys on that yet. Yeah, and those 5 bullet points, yeah, exactly, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't understand quite why we're acting as bankroll for a private developer.
If we don't, that land's just gonna sit, and we're not gonna address the housing needs of the city. Yes, Mr. Mayor?
To Councilmember Wood's question, this is a question we did ask of the developer. At least had the conversation about a time frame in which to have them built. The complicated point of this development, when you're trying to ask for a timeline of completion, it's all based upon the sales. So if they start by building 2 duplexes or 4plexes and get those rolling and built and, at a position where they can be occupied and sold, then the revenue that comes in from the sale of those will go to building the next set of townhouse 4plexes, and then the next, and the next. So timing-wise, or duration for this, that's an unknown. The other thing I'd like to share with council, just as a reminder, that whether it's the developer or the city that builds the infrastructure, if it was the developer, at one point, we take ownership of that infrastructure anyway, regardless, because it'll become a city street, it'll become the city's right-of-way. So whether we build it or the developer builds it, but at this point in time, if you were to, as Councilmember Swank had mentioned, you take what was 2018 price point, and now you look at 2024 price point, construction loans and everything, the amount of the street infrastructure to be built, as estimated in 2018, was about $750,000. Now it's $2.1 million to build the same infrastructure. If the developer were to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and move forward, it would, one, be in violation of the initial agreement between the developer and the city's TIF, and that being that these were going to be in the price point of $240,000 or somewhere in that range. The Affordable Housing Commission now, started as the Affordable Housing Task Force, came up with a spread that they deemed to be affordable housing, which was $140,000 up to $250,000 at the time. I think that still applies with the Affordable Housing Commission, that's the range. So this is within the commission's range. If the developer had to build the houses and had to build that infrastructure, there's no way those homes could be sold for $240,000 and the developer not basically lose their shorts on this one. Because of the cost of the infrastructure added in, because that's part of the calculus to build these. This is taking that financial burden off of what will be equity-bearing homes, so people can earn wealth in these moving forward. But as I said a minute ago, either way you dice this thing, the city would ultimately take over that asset as a city's responsibility moving forward. So it makes a lot of sense for us to go ahead and start building it, or have it contracted out. We're not going to build it, but we want to have surety in how this works out, so that the homes that we are being told will be built over time will get built.
Yes, sir.
Dude, I don't see any guarantee that these will be affordable either. And what's to keep them from building this on our dime and then coming back and saying, oh, we have to sell them for $750 now?
When we did the original ordinance, 10320, the previous council, the price point was in there. And the escalator clause was in there also, maximum 3%. When we amend that, I would, and I would defer to the law director here, I would assume that we will put similar caps on annual increases and the target price. But that was actually in the ordinance, what could be. Started out at 220,000, they found out they couldn't do it for that, it went to 240. and the escalator clause is 3% per year. The other thing that we need to remember when we build these houses, right now that is unimproved property. When we build those houses, based on that price point, one of the things that's going to increase if they're all 42 are sold, is that the Athens City Schools will receive $126,000 in property taxes every year. The city will receive some property taxes. Right now, it's just trees, weeds, and animals, and we're getting no tax money off of it. But eventually, the Athens City Schools and others will benefit from this, which, sometimes we have the schools over there and the city over here. Well, we're very much interconnected, and that would be a great benefit for that. Mr. Mayor?
I was just going to say again, I think we're failing to mention, even though you did mention it, Councilmember Swank, is the TIF revenue as it comes in, as these properties are developed, and they go from a property valuation of, I don't know, $6,000 now for green space to the revaluation of there being a $250,000, $240,000 unit there, each one of them individually, that revenue as it comes in. And of course, it's going to be over time. Those properties get reassessed by the county auditor. And then once that valuation comes in, the capture is 70% of that valuation increase goes directly back to the city of Athens through this legislation. That'll be another piece of legislation that amends the TIF language. Because currently the TIF language speaks to the 70% going to the developer. The amendment will be that the 70% comes back to the city and goes back into water, streets, and sewer.
And as we can see, this, as the mayor is describing it, is a rather complex legal process, and that's why that's not on the agenda for this evening. And what we're talking about this evening is just authorization for the Service Safety Director to bid for the infrastructure, with the caveat, nothing will be signed until we pass the ordinance of the new TIF. Jessica?
So that being said, my question could probably wait. I was just wondering if the 5-year restriction on keeping them owner occupied could be extended to something like 10 to avoid turning more things into rentals.
When we start
When we
talking,
get to that, I'm
when we
sure.
start talking about that second ordinance, yeah, I think I think all of those things are subject for discussion, yes.
We can certainly discuss that. There also has been discussion, who knows how this would go, of creating within this new development an HOA, and the HOA could set down guidelines just basically stating that these homes cannot be used for rental purposes. But
Much like you already have the HOA at University Estates.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
we're working on that.
Yeah, which at one time was very thick and very detailed, down to the size of mailboxes and streetlights.
Oh, I do have one other comment, and I don't know if this really goes into this or later, but as you mentioned, the Affordable Housing Commission is supposed to weigh in, and there was some concern when they first looked at it for a moment, the plans, whether they were completely comfortable with it as a universal design project. So how much leeway do we have in terms of design tweaking?
Even though we have 10320, the original, it is fully amendable.
Because I spoke to a gerontologist today about this, and she had a couple of, I thought, very sound suggestions. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
And as a member of the Planning Commission and the Affordable Housing Commission, I expect you to be very, very much involved in this.
Well, and it's my neighborhood too, so I have to
Well,
be
that's true,
careful
it's your
about
ward.
it. It's my ward in my neighborhood, so, yeah.
Yeah. Other comments from any members of council? Additional comments from the mayor? Comments from the citizens gathered this evening? Okay, we'll have that under first reading later in today's agenda. That concludes the Planning and Development Committee.
Thank you, Member Swank. We will now start our regular session tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging that here in Athens County, we live and work on land initially settled and developed by earlier people, particularly the Shawnee and the Osage, and those identified through cultures commonly known as the Adena, Hopewell, and Fort Ancient. This acknowledgement reminds us of the importance of honoring history, people, and the planet as we work to improve our city's legacy. Our first order of business is to establish quorum. We have 6 of 7 council members present this evening, and we have quorum.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would like to move that we amend tonight's agenda, adding ordinance 06224 under first readings, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids where necessary and enter into contracts for the Woods Edge infrastructure project at University Estates. I move that we amend the agenda.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the agenda. Is there any discussion on this motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the agenda is amended. Thank you, Member Swank. We now have the disposition of minutes for the regular session of City Council held on May 6th, 2024. May I have a motion for the approval of these minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes have been approved. We now have communications, and I'll just start by saying that we are 6 of 7 tonight. Member Reisner, if you're a regular attendee, Member Reisner has not been able to be here for several weeks, but he will be back next week. We're looking forward to having him. So welcome back to Athens, Member Reisner. Are there any other communications from members of council? Yes, Member McCary.
Thank you. This communication comes from Dr. Carolyn Lewis, a member of our Commission on Disabilities. She shares that the former state senator Tom Roberts, who's also the Ohio State Conference NAACP president, has endorsed the City of Athens charter request for a chapter for the NAACP. We have had a student chapter since the 70s, but never one for adults. And this kind of organizational development in the area complements our city's efforts around racial equity. This is going to result in an organizational meeting for interested persons on Monday, June 3rd at 6 p.m. at the Ohio University Inn at 331 Richland Avenue in the Bob Rudy Room. There will be light refreshments provided. I serve as one of the representatives on the Commission on Disabilities, and if folks are interested in hearing more from Dr. Lewis about this opportunity to support the development of an NAACP chapter, they can reach out to me. I'll be happy to pass that along, and that's it for this communication.
Thank you. Yes, Member Spionis.
Yeah, I just have a small, but I think rather important message. I received an email. I don't know that people necessarily want to have their names out loud, so I'll just say that this person on the west side is very concerned about the traffic and on Bayard. And apparently motorcycles and cars have been speeding up there really fast. So Director Stone got back to me and shared some concerns about what to do about that. And he notified the police, and we're going to look at how things are going to go. But I notice everybody, please be careful on Bayard. Thank you.
Any other communications? Member McCary.
Thank you. This is a blended communication and report. Council members have received several updates over the last several months from me regarding the city's partnership with the Strong Cities Network, and we're fortunate to have a couple of representatives from that team here with us in the audience. So I wanted to recap on that partnership and offer opportunities for council members to ask questions of those representatives from the Strong Cities Network today. We do have our Mayor Patterson to thank for entering us into this partnership, which is a 2-year agreement to help Athens develop strategies for promoting what's referred to as social cohesion. And that might sound like a fancy academic term, but it's about the bonds that connect us, and they're based in trust and also a pursuit of creating safe environments for people to feel included in. The safety part is kind of twofold. The first is a very practical recognition that there are threats and threats of violence that result from extremism and polarization that we see in the world today. Some of that might result in violent protest, and in other times we'll see even more disastrous sorts of things. I am very pleased to live in a city where we have not seen as many of those kinds of problematic behaviors, and we want Athens to remain that kind of strong place. My engagement with the Strong Cities Network has really revolved around 5 sort of areas. The first has been consultation that I benefited from during our council's discussion of community calls for us to adopt a ceasefire resolution for the war in the Middle East earlier this term. I was able to benefit from speaking directly with members of the Strong Cities Network across the nation to receive resources on how other councils were managing similar challenges and questions about our responsibility in some of these situations. I've also participated in a number of webinars which are noted in detailed event reports on the Strong Cities website. So folks can easily reference or just Google the Strong Cities Network and click on event reports to discover how different cities have been responding to these kinds of challenges. I also, in a recent council meeting, mentioned my trip to New York City, which was intended to be a roundtable for mayors and elected officials at Columbia University, where we have seen the trend of college campuses struggling with some of these issues as well, particularly around civility and nonviolent protest. We also have received information via email about the Transatlantic Dialogue program that the Strong Cities Network has been involved in, which most recently held a convening in Strasbourg, France, where we've been able to learn from cities across the globe on how we're responding to these different kinds of threats and attempting to promote, again, social cohesion. Social cohesion for me in this environment, in Athens specifically, is a blend of what at the university we commonly refer to as a sense of belonging that we want people to experience. And then you might also look to the partnership that the university has with the city with regard to promoting the message of making respect visible. And that is another way that we promote social cohesion by talking about the importance of exchanging ideas civilly across differences. And we expect that that's going to be increasingly important as we near the presidential election season in the fall. And I would also like to mention that we are able to have the Strong Cities Network's representatives here today, in part because they're participating in a dialogue and luncheon for community members who are engaged in this kind of work tomorrow that will be held at the Athens Community Center. This is a preliminary opportunity for members of the network staff to meet with different players in the community who work in different sectors, be that city government or organizations like our Racial Equity Coalition of Athens County. We do recognize that the engagement of youth and thinking about what we can do to promote inclusive attitudes and behaviors in K through 12 settings is an important part of this work. Really, every sector has a role to play, and I was very fortunate to learn at the most recent Transatlantic Dialogue just how many initiatives there are available for us to consider adopting with regard to focus on engaging senior citizens or youth or university community collaborations. And with that sort of overview, I would like to invite Eric Rosend and Caroline Wade, two staff members from the Strong Cities Network, who can share a little bit about their mission and be present to take questions. Thank you for being here, Eric.
Sure, thank you, Mayor, thank you, council members. It's really an honor to be here in your community, to get the opportunity to speak directly to you, answer any questions you have. I'm here with my colleague Caroline Wade, who is one of our main points of contact for the city and Micah as we work together in the ways that Micah described. And before starting, I just want to say, having seen Micah and the mayor in various environments, both domestically and internationally, I can't think of two better representatives of a city to have. So congratulations to you for electing your mayor and electing Micah and giving them the opportunity to engage with us, because we've really learned a lot from them, the perspective of a small city in the United States, a small town in the United States, and what it's going through in these sort of times of global crisis, I think is really valuable for us to learn as we engage across our country, across the world. But I think it's also really important for others to see that the United States is not just New York City, it's not just Los Angeles, it's actually mostly in between. And Athens, I think, is a great example of the kinds of people, the kinds of innovations, and the kinds of approaches to governance that I think, the United States should be very proud of, and so we're proud as a network to be able to support that. Just briefly about the network, for those of you who aren't familiar, we are now 234 cities, I believe, around the world, and as large as New Delhi, India, as small as Athens, Ohio. We have New York City. We have about 25 cities in the United States, and we're growing. And I think one of the reasons why we're growing is we're showing the value of small city engagement. And so through Athens and through the mayor's leadership, and why small cities who may not have thought that issues around social cohesion, around hate, around extremism are relevant to them because they're far away from the threats. They're not as far away from the threats as they probably think they are often. And even if they are far away from the threats, what better time to be preventative and to build the kinds of bonds that Micah's talking about with community, with police, with universities, starting from the mayor, but obviously including the city council and all aspects of the city. We work mainly in 3 or 4 areas. One is the peer-to-peer, so connecting cities to each other, because we feel like the best way for them to learn is not to hear from me, but to hear from each other. And we, as we like to say, we set the table. We create a space, we curate the conversation, but it's really for them, for cities, whether it's a mayor or city council member or city officials, to really drive the conversation. And from that, we elevate good practices. So when we hear and learn about a new experience at a city that probably doesn't make the evening news outside of that city, but should be elevated as a good practice, and so others can learn from that, we do that. So through our website, through our other online resources, and the like. We offer webinars. We're now running a webinar series every month, specifically designed around the global crisis, local impact framing, recognizing that whether it's the war in Gaza, climate, migration, misinformation and disinformation, conspiracy narratives, these are global issues that are having impacts in different ways in different communities. And we find that creating a space, this online space, once a month for cities to hear from each other and learn from each other is really valuable, because they feel like they're in this together. And there's a lot to be learned from that experience of sharing and learning. We do a lot of in-person things, in-person gatherings, whether it's transatlantic. We do a lot of work in Africa and Asia. We have a global summit every year, which we hope Mayor Patterson can join us in Cape Town, South Africa in early December. And one of the values of these global summits is for people all over the world, mayors all over the world, to see just how much they have in common and how a city is a city is a city for the most part. And there's a lot to be learned from this engagement with other contexts, and that we, again, try to create this unique space, whether it's on issues of women local leaders and dealing with, and why it's so important to have more women elected officials at a local level when we're talking about issues of social cohesion. Whether it's about border cities working with each other, so cities that might share a border, it could be in the U.S. context, a state border, or globally an international border, why that city-to-city collaboration is so valuable, and what can be learned from that. And then increasingly it's hate speech. How cities, again, big or small, are dealing with this rising phenomena of hate speech that's often targeting the local elected officials themselves. And what can a city, small city in particular, do about a problem that has been so globalized and so sort of internationalized that maybe small cities feel they don't have a voice in the solution. And we try to create space for that voice to be heard, and then elevate those voices to national and international levels. We produce guides. So you can look on our website. We've produced a number of resources for mayors, for local government, that are interactive. And so we have videos, interviews with mayors, interviews with local officials talking about their work and why it matters. We're not academic. We're anti-academic. We are anti-mumbo jumbo, as I like to call it. We are, we don't talk in platitudes. We talk about people's real experiences that are not our experiences, but we are just a conveyor of their experiences. And we think that's really important because having been a federal official, having worked a lot in the international space, I've seen how people talk about issues in this sort of abstract way about real people's lives on the ground, and the people who are being impacted by these issues are never given a voice in those conversations. And so the policies that end up resulting from those conversations are often disconnected from the realities on the ground. And so we really try in our very, very small way on the issues we work on to sort of change that dimension, change that sort of balance. And then finally, in the US context, and I'll stop here and take your questions, we've been privileged to receive our first DHS grant that has allowed us to work with 5 small and mid-sized cities in very different ways to help them build out a collaborative prevention model, social cohesion model that is driven by the city government, but is inclusive of the community. So it's very much a bottom-up exercise that is designed to build and build on what's already happening in a city, a comprehensive whole-of-city approach to preventing hate and extremism and strengthening social cohesion. And it means working through, at the primary and secondary school level, K through 12. It means working with senior citizens. It means working with universities. It means working with the private sector. It means working with the police, the diversity, equity, and inclusion side of government in a holistic approach that's spearheaded by the mayor in collaboration with the city council. So we're sort of maybe it's a 2-year program, as Micah said. We're about maybe 2/3 into year 1, and we're really excited to be on the ground here because to meet with face-to-face with your colleagues tomorrow and to have this opportunity tonight, because one of the lessons from the COVID experience and all this virtual convening is that it's more convenient to do it virtually, but it doesn't come close to sort of serving the, meeting the value of an in-person convening. The trust that you build in in-person conversations just far exceeds the kind of trust you can build in a virtual space. So we're really glad to be here. Happy to answer any questions. Caroline can answer questions. And thank you for the opportunity.
Member Slink?
Mike has done a real good job of keeping us abreast of his activities and extolling the virtues of your organization, but he's left out one very, very important part. How are you funded?
Well, we're funded through a variety of means. So it's project-based funding typically. So we get funding from, for example, DHS to work with the 5 small and mid-sized cities. So I'm here in Athens as part of that grant. It's a 2-year grant. We are funded by small foundations. So, for example, we were in New York when Micah was with us in New York. That was a family foundation based out of New York City that wanted to fund a specific initiative on looking at how the Israel-Gaza crisis was impacting cities and in the United States. And so that was funded through that foundation. When Micah was with us in Strasbourg, that was funded through mixture of the European Union gives us money to do transatlantic work. U.S. embassies in different parts of the world will give us money to connect the United States local officials with local officials in that country. So it's a mixture of government funding and non-government funding. And the demand for our work far exceeds the funding we have for our work. So we are always trying to be creative and entrepreneurial in terms of how we can make the most of our few resources. And the last thing I'll mention is that we are part of a larger organization. Sort of our fiscal and legal home is the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, isdglobal.org. So they are our home legally. And so we get some core funding through them as well. But for the most part, I would say 95% of our money is grants and donations. And the last thing I'll mention, because you sort of opened that door, which is we have this ambitious but I think realistic idea to come to Ohio, beyond Athens, where we obviously have a great relationship here, and the city of Columbus, where they're a very active member, and we'll be organizing something in Columbus in September where Athens will be actively involved, we hope, to launch what we call Strong Cities Ohio. And that is, the concept there is to be able to support small and mid-sized cities across a defined geography with some of the sort of services that we can provide small and mid-sized cities around understanding the on and offline threat environment that their communities are living in, and then how to access our network, our resources, our tools in a dedicated way. So right now we have a small team that's servicing a wide geography of cities, and we think that a state-focused initiative as a pilot in Ohio, supported by community foundations, and really a bottom-up approach to prevention is what's needed, and to do it almost on a state-by-state basis as opposed to a top-down sort of national down basis. So that's what we're hoping to. I was in Columbus earlier today talking to some foundations and the city about how we can catalyze this and really bring the kind of tailored support that a city like Athens, but beyond Athens, because Athens now is getting a lot of, I think, a unique support here from our network. We want other cities to benefit from that, but you can't do it one-on-one. To bring this to scale, you need sort of to bring a whole group of cities across the state together, working with some of the state networks, and having dedicated staff based in Ohio that we're working with on our team to do all this. So I'm going to be sharing more of that information with the mayor. We obviously would want both Athens and our other key partner in the state, Columbus, as sort of our anchor cities as we build out across Ohio. So happy to share anything and everything. The last point I'll mention is transparency. We preach transparency as a key to trust building, and so we are completely transparent in everything we do. And so we just want to make that clear, that there's nothing that, any information you want about our work is, we're an open book.
Thank you.
I think it's really exciting that you're going to make your pilot state project happen in Ohio. I think that's really great. You've talked about so much positive information, but you are probably aware that the Southern Poverty Law Center has demonstrated that Ohio has more than its fair share of hate groups, some as close as Lancaster. So Proud Boys and other similar organizations. So I'm delighted that you're going to be setting up such an initiative in the state of Ohio, and I really hope that many more communities around the state will choose to take part.
Well, our hope is that with advocates and champions like yourselves, you can help get that message out, and in big and small ways. I'm actually going to Chansey
Yes.
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Well pronounced.
Well pronounced.
Yes. Well done.
Let's put it this way, I'm 1 for 2 in pronunciation
Yeah.
on that today. I was 0 for 1, and then the mayor corrected me. Thanks to Micah's intervention, we're going to be meeting with Chansey tomorrow to talk about how they can get involved in our work. And it's really reaching those smaller communities in small ways. We think can make a big difference, and it's not something the federal government or the state government is probably prioritizing. Nor can they really. So we're sort of a complementary resource.
Member Spiolas?
This is quick. So you made the comment you're anti-academic, and I'm like, something to that effect. And having, as a retired academic and researcher, I have to ask about your research arm, because clearly you present best practices to see. So I'm just wondering how you get to those, being this anti-academic.
First of all, I'm the son of 2 academics, so I say I'm anti-academic as sort of a little bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
I'm acutely aware of the need to ensure that everything we do is informed by research and rigorous methodology, and it is. It's more about how we communicate, and it's more about the messages we deliver and sort of, again, how we talk about these issues, and understanding what our audience, the language, both the actual language, but also they speak, but also the language they use and will resonate with them. And I found that in this field of counter hate, counter extremism, you have a lot of researchers who generate lots of interesting findings, but communication with lay audiences and policymakers in particular, as you go down to the local level, is often, it's like ships passing in the night. And what we try to do is be that connective tissue. So we think, at least, we understand what and how to talk about these issues in a way that will resonate with the local communities. But in the back, we are informed by the research and the academic rigor. So, and again, we have a whole theory of change that underpins our work. We're all about monitoring and evaluating what cities are going to be doing in this space, in part because we know that ultimately taxpayers who are going to fund any local initiative are not going to fund things that aren't having an impact. And so it behooves us to work with cities to show how, if they are going to take forward an initiative that we're proponents of, that they know how to measure that impact and communicate that impact. And but the last point I'll mention about being anti-academic is, if you look at our publications, they're very reader-friendly. They're designed for people who are very busy, who are interested in this issue and want to make a difference, but don't have the time to read, footnotes and or get distracted down sort of rabbit holes of theories. And so we sort of cut through that, and what we present is informed by that, but not visibly sort of connected to that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I'm all about PhDs and
President Kroll?
Yeah, I'll just say welcome and thank you so much for coming. I completely understand your comments about being here in person and not being here virtually. Not only so we can share our city with you, actually, but also to have you here to learn from each other. And also say I'm also the son of two academics, and I completely understand your point about that non-academic bent. So I appreciate that.
I could just share that this work feels very personally meaningful for me as someone who has come to Athens, made it home for 20 years, but has never been to the Athens County Fair, largely, for example, because so many of my white colleagues and community members have said, Micah, that's really just not a place we'd encourage you to go. And similarly, I've had student staff members who've stopped by a subway in a local town or a village and shared that they were warned that they had just missed a KKK meeting that had taken place there. I've also been here long enough to see and hear threats against the lives of our first Black male president, and people who said that they want to take violent action against all the gays in this liberal LGBTQ-loving town of Athens. And we know that with Pride Month coming up in June, I've been getting emails as the director of Ohio University's Pride Center about the threats to different Pride festivals. And we are so fortunate to live in a city where we haven't seen these kinds of violent disasters. We want to stay strong. And I believe that the Strong Cities approach to not assuming we have no good work happening in this area. In fact, we can look to many amazing examples of this work happening in all kinds of sectors, not only the university's Division of Diversity and Inclusion, but our city's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility coordinator has been involved for years with work in the schools, teaching racial equity and justice courses, or collaborating with the School of Theater to put on bystander intervention workshops. So this work is continuing, and the sharing of best practices is not only meant for us to be able to share across organizations within Athens, but even to begin to form these stronger relationships with villages like Chansey, who are just in recent council meetings talking about really challenging legislative topics, including LGBTQ protections, housing access, and how to respond to the stresses that community members locally are feeling from conflicts abroad. These things are happening now, and we anticipate more challenges to come. So I want to thank everyone who's been supportive of this collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll just note, we have a long meeting in front of us. If you would rather step out, we have a long day tomorrow, we completely understand. No worries. We have one final communication tonight. City Council has received a notice of a Division of Liquor Control transfer. And this transfer is for a D1 beer only for on-premises consumption or in sealed containers for carry-out. And it is not changing address, but it is from the Richland Dynasty LLC at 498 Richland Avenue. And it's coming from Athens Dynasty Incorporated at the same address.
Is there a change of,
Any comments? Yes, member?
I'm just curious, is there a change of ownership of that restaurant?
I hope not.
Me too.
That's unclear to me. Any other comments on this liquor control? Okay, thank you. We now have reports and communications from other elected officials. Law Director Eliason?
No.
Auditor Hecht? No report. Treasurer Thomas may not be here tonight. Mayor Patterson?
Just a few items to update council on, not even update, you guys hopefully should know this, that this is Berry Week in the city of Athens, recognizing the business entrepreneurs that were or are Edward and Maddie Berry. So there's ongoing events surrounding that. Then this coming weekend is Memorial Day weekend, and I share that because council will move their meeting from Monday to Tuesday evening. And along with that, with the Memorial Day events, Director Stone will be the keynote speaker at the West Union Cemetery, has been asked to speak at 11 a.m. After the parade makes its procession through the city, and then it winds up at the West Union Cemetery. So if council is available, or anyone out there in TV land who would like to join, it should be an interesting and personalized keynote with someone from our local community. The last thing to share with council, of late, I have been asked to sit on quite a few different panels and boards, given the success that we had with our Deputy Service Safety Director, Andrew Chicky, going through the local infrastructure hub boot camp, which was basically a product that was brought forward by the National League of Cities and the U.S. Conference of Mayors and other organizations, to where we, as I've told council before, will be receiving $12.5 million for over 250 charge points, 50 charge stations in 19 communities from Athens to Dayton, Ohio, to include Dayton, Ohio. And these panels that I've been sitting on, everybody wants to know, how in the world did Athens do this? I have also been in communication with Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, because they were certainly intrigued with our ability to build out as many partners as we did across southern Ohio to make this work. Because at the end of the day, for DOT, and this applies to EPA or DOE or HUD for that matter, with the Bills Act money that is out there and flowing, the $1.2 trillion, that they are looking for collaborations like this because it makes their job easier, as opposed to reviewing 19 separate grants coming at them. They're reviewing one where cities, towns, and villages have collaborated to have a joint package moving forward, which is no easy feat if you think about it. But with the help of Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council, as well as our local LDD, which is the Buckeye Hills Regional Council, and a lot of work from Andrew Chicky, we were able to pull this off. So there's organizations across the nation that are really intrigued with what little old Athens has been able to pull off. So I'm pretty proud to be asked to serve on these panels. I'll be on several panels over the next couple of weeks. And then at the end of June, I've been asked to travel to Pittsburgh for a day to sit on a panel there, again, to discuss this particular grant. So more to come on all that work. But trust me, it's good work because it's shining light on the city of Athens and all the positive that we have to offer the rest of the world with what we're doing. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Mayor.
Crowell.
Okay, we will now move on to ordinances for third reading. As mentioned, a few of these are introduced by Councilmember Reisner, but we will have another council member discuss them tonight. The first ordinance is 37-24, an ordinance amending the 2024 appropriation ordinance 130-23 and authorizing interfund transfers, introduced by Councilmember Reisner and Member Clodfelter.
Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1. The 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 130-23 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $40,000 to APR Fund 273, Transaction Code 500 for soccer netting. $1,253.63 to the Luke's Trust Fund 650, Transaction Code 600 for transfer and fund line closure, meaning that's getting zeroed out. We're using every penny in that fund for a good cause, and then it will be done. And $63,000 to the Capital Improvements Fund 580.580, Transaction Code 600 for transfer and increasing the total appropriations by said amounts. Section 2, the auditor is hereby authorized to make the following interfund transfers: from the Luke's Trust Fund 650 to the Cemetery Fund 210, $1,253.63, and from the Capital Improvements Fund 580 to the Transportation Assistance Fund 214, $63,000. And Section 3, this ordinance shall be in effect and full force upon passage and approval by the mayor.
Member Clodfelter, would you like to make a motion to approve this ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 37-24. Are there any comments from council members? City administration, members of the public? Okay, all those in favor of adopting 37-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The motion has been approved and is passed. Ordinance 38-24 is an ordinance amending ordinance 03-21, authorizing the city auditor to deposit 50% of the transient guest tax revenue into the tourism fund and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner and Member Clodfelter.
Section 1. Section 1 of Ordinance 03-21 is hereby amended to read as follows. The Athens City Auditor is hereby authorized to deposit 50% of the transient guest tax revenue collected for the period beginning January 1st, 2018 into the Tourism Fund and 50% into the General Fund in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Section 5739.09B1. Section 2. The ordinance shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of the health, welfare, and safety of the residents of the city of Athens, Ohio, in order to meet the city's financial obligation to the Athens Convention and Visitors Bureau, and it shall be in full force and effect upon its passage and approval by the mayor. I move for the approval of this ordinance.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Member Swank.
A question for the auditor. I assume this is the January, February, March quarter? And if it is, how much money are we talking about?
I'm sorry, I don't know. So you're talking about for this year?
Well, what we're approving right now, or is this just in general?
This is just in general.
Oh, for the whole year?
This is, yeah, I don't know why we passed this ordinance before like we did. This is in the ORC. We're taking out that deadline is what we've done.
Okay.
Because it's required by the ORC, no date ending for any of this stuff. So we've been doing it and we have continued to do it even past this December deadline because it's the law. And so we're just correcting our paperwork.
So basically each quarter when you get this authorizes you to take 50% and put it
That's
in the
exactly
tourism
what
fund,
we do,
without
yes.
having to do this each time.
We split it when we get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, we actually, and just to give you an idea, 50% is supposed to go in the general fund. We do that easily. The other 50% goes into the tourism fund, and from there, we pay the Convention and Visitors Bureau.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other council members? Elected officials, city administration, I'm sorry.
Just a
Member
question
McCary.
for the auditor. Could you comment on the helpfulness of making this an emergency, passing this based on an emergency?
Well, yes, because we're already doing it. So we realized this. So our first set of payments came in this year in April because the first quarter ended in March. And so that's when we realized that this ordinance that guides us had this deadline that had just passed. So we've really only made one split so far, but that's why we also want to get this in place right away.
Thank you.
Any other council members? Mayor?
No, I'm just laughing because, yes, I'm listening to the whole conversation, and again, basically, this is an editorial edit to this whole thing, so that since by ORC, we're compelled to give 50% of our TGT to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Tourism Bureau, why have to revisit this every single year when ORC says you've got to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Understood. Audience members? Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 39-24 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 27-24, amending the 2024 appropriation ordinance, introduced by Jeff Reisner and member Clodfelter.
Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1. Section 2 of Ordinance 2724 is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 2. The 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 130-23 is further amended by decreasing Diversion Fund 232, Transaction Code 100, by $44,900, and decreasing the Court Community Corrections Fund 235, Transaction Code 100, by $66,500, and decreasing the total appropriations by said amounts. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in effect and full force upon passage and approval by the mayor. I move that we approve this ordinance.
Seconded.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? City administration? Audience? Thank you. All those in favor of 39-24 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 41-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Development Services Agency for any eligible Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, program funds for program year 2024, introduced by Member McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. I'll first read this very brief ordinance language. Section 1 indicates that the mayor is hereby authorized to submit an application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Development Services Agency for any eligible Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, program funds for program year 2024. Section 2 indicates that this ordinance shall be in effect and full force upon its passage and approval by the mayor. And I would like to move that we adopt ordinance 41-24.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? City administration? Audience members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 42-24 is an ordinance authorizing a city network upgrade project, number 369, introduced by Member McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. As with our other ordinances up for third reading, this has been reviewed in committee and read now for the third time, beginning with, whereas said project includes replacement of all city network switches, wireless access points, and additional hardware for the fiber project to greatly reduce technical issues from aging technology and non-uniformity of equipment, and the equipment needed for the planned project for Court Street wireless access. And whereas said equipment is specialized technology with programming services that are proprietary, limited to a single source, and therefore competitive, bidding is not required. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, that Section 1, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a contract with the GoToIT or GoToIT group for installation and equipment replacement for a city network upgrade project number 369. Section 2 indicates that the 2024 appropriation ordinance 130-23, is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the sum of $250,000 to Capital Improvements Fund 580.580, Transaction Class 500, and increasing the total appropriations by said amounts. Section 3 reads that the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to expend up to $250,000 from Capital Improvement Fund 580.580, Transaction Class 500 for said projects 369. And finally, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect upon passage and approval by the mayor. I would like to move that we adopt 42-24.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? City administration? Audience members? All those in favor of this ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 45-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to pay the 2024 membership fee for the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia, ORCA, to provide financial support from the city's transient guest tax for the Bailey's Trail System, along with other recreational activities. Introduced by Councilmember Wood.
Yeah, thank you. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to pay the 2024 membership fee for the Outdoor Recreational Council of Appalachia, ORCA, to provide financial support from the city's transient guest tax for the Bailey's Trail System, along with other recreational activities. Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, the mayor is hereby authorized to pay the 2024 membership fee to the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia, ORCA, the Council of Governments, COG, for funding the Bailey's Trail System, along with other recreational activities, in the amount of $90,000 from the city's transient guest tax paid into the general fund, provided that the process of such tax are sufficient, legally available, and lawfully appropriated for the purpose. Section 2, the ordinance shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor. I move that we adopt Ordinance 0-4524.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for approval. Are there any comments or questions? Member Swank.
Yeah, over the last 4 or 5 weeks that we've been discussing this, we've had quite a bit of conversation about ORCA in general, the Baileys specifically, and the cities and the county's participation, all the way back to an ordinance passed in 2019 authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement. We've also had communication from the city auditor as to the timing of this, the appropriateness of this, and in fact, in an email, a request that we do not pay this until we have a 9% balance in our general fund. And as such, this evening I would like to propose an amendment to this ordinance, and I have a copy here for each of the members of council. It's very short, but it gets very, very specific and is in line with the recommendation of the auditor. I've also talked with Director Stone at length about this, and have also cleared this through the law director's office. Essentially, we can drop down to the bottom of section 1, and where it says, provided that the proceeds of such tax are sufficient, legally available, lawfully appropriated for the purpose, and here's the amendment, and the general fund reserve balance is at 9% or higher which was the recommendation of the auditor. This gets very, very specific as to when we would pay it. This says we will pay it. This shows our support for the Baileys, but it makes this very, very, very specific and consistent with bringing our general fund balance in compliance with our stated policy, a policy that bond entities review anytime we're applying for a bond. Mr. President, I would move to amend 4524 to read as presented to members of council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for amending 45-24. Are there comments or discussion on the amendment in question? Member Wood.
Would this require it to go back to first reading, or would we be able to
Yes.
pass it today?
It goes back to first reading.
And would the auditor happen to know about when we would hit 9%?
No, I can't promise that we will. I will say this, our fund balance threshold is 7.5%. And when I was here maybe a month ago, we were at 6.5%. We're now down to 6%. Any extra money we have is we appropriate and use for other city services that we need. And it's 9% is not unreasonable at all, with our upper threshold being 15%. If all we're ever going to do is hover around that lowest level, that is not really a good situation to be in either, because then it's too easy to drop below our policy, which we have done now and have gone down even more.
Member Spianis.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful for those who are watching, and I think we've discussed this before, and you're probably better at explaining this than I am, but correct me if I'm not saying it right, but it's important that we have a balance that it follows our policies, and so that when bond agencies come and look at us in terms of getting more monies, that we'll have the best rate possible. Do you want to expand on that? Because I think it's like a city's credit rating. You know, if your credit rating is low, everything you borrow costs more, and you have more trouble getting more monies. So if you want to
No,
expand on
you're
that?
exactly right about that. And the reason we have that is so that if there is some kind of crisis or something happens and our revenue changes, like COVID, our tax revenue, which supports our general fund, absolutely dropped down. And so if that were to happen again and we don't have enough of a reserve, we need to have enough in place to pay our employees is our number one thing. But we also have to keep the lights on. And if they need equipment to do their job, we need to be able to buy that. Police have to have vehicles, all of the kinds of things we have to have that, in my mind, would take precedence over supporting this trail. Not that I don't support it, but we just have to have enough money in the bank to take care of things if anything were to happen. And that's where we are now. But back to your question too, Member Woods. We won't be able to pay this till at least July or August. And so our next round of payments from the hotels, motels, and B&Bs will come in after June, the second quarter. And they have 20 days to pay, so that puts us back to at least 20 days into July. And so by the time we get that, then that would be the earliest, because we just don't have the money in from our transient guest tax revenue at this point. And I expect that to happen, but I also think that we need to take some very serious steps to keep us from falling below our policy. There's, as Member Spildness just said, sorry, Solveig, we're in a bad position with that right now. And it's very important that we keep that up. We've talked about getting a bond for some land purchase. I don't think we're going to go through with that now, but that would cause us issues if we decided to do that this year. If we can't get this up to where the bonding companies and our credit rating, it should be. That makes sense.
Member McCary.
Thanks. I think it might just be helpful for viewers who haven't seen all of the discussions leading up to this to point out that not only did we end up in this situation for unexpected reasons with regard to medical expenses, but we are also finding some creative ways to try and help ourselves out of it. And we have our treasurer, Thomas, to thank for some creative investment opportunities. And I just wanted to ask if you could briefly recap what we're trying to do to get our balance a little higher.
Yes, well, I think we still have that ordinance coming along where we've changed our distribution of interest income among our funds, and instead of dividing it among all the general obligation funds, we are only putting it in the funds that are required by law through the ORC and the general fund, because that's what the ORC says, that's where it's supposed to go. The general fund money can be used other places, but right now we need to keep all the revenue in there that we can. And so, yes. So we do have a very good treasurer who is following all this stuff very closely. And that should help too. But even though the actual amount of what we might get in July from our TGT, I expect it to go up from what we got in the first quarter. And because if it's the same as the first quarter, we won't have the money then to pay this either. But it should go up through the summer. This spring included, all the people in town in May and that kind of thing. So we should have the money then. But I also think just doesn't make us look good to go ahead and pass something like this if we don't really even know if we can do it. There's no real hurry because we know we can't until at least then, but
Thank
it's
you,
up to
Auditor.
council.
Other questions from council? I have one, Auditor. Do you foresee other instances where we will need to add Member Swank's amendment here to other ordinances?
No, not offhand.
Okay.
I can't think of anything offhand. This is, this is a very large amount of money for us to be giving to something like this. This is a whole employee. It's more than we give the Economic Development Council. And I think we should rethink this amount. However, we committed ourselves to this, and this will be our 5th year. And but I think that's a good time to rethink our commitment in light of the other things we're going through right now.
Thank you, Auditor.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions on this amendment in question? Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend 45-24. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The amendment has been passed, and ordinance 45-24 has been read for the first time. We are now moving on to ordinances for second reading. I will read the title and then check to see if there are any comments or questions. Ordinance 46-24, an ordinance from the city of Athens, Ohio, Ohio Whites Mill Cap Section 1135 project modifications for improvement of environment design and construction project in Athens County, Ohio, introduced by Councilmember Swank. Ordinance 47-24, an ordinance authorizing the local share of the United States Army Corps of Engineers Hocking River Study, introduced by Councilmember Swank. Ordinance 48-24, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 25, Flood Damage Prevention, Chapter 25.01, General Provisions, Section 25.01.07, basis for establishing the areas of special flood hazard, introduced by Councilmember McCary. Ordinance 49-24, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a 2024 to 2027 partnership agreement with the Athens County Commissioners as applicant and grantee, if funded, for submission of an application to the Office of Community Development, Ohio Department of Development, ODOD, for the Community Housing Impact and Preservation Program, CHIP, and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember McCary. Ordinance 51-24, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 3, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.03, Executive, Other Officials, Section 3.03.21, Investment of Treasury Funds, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. That was the ordinance that the auditors spoke to a bit ago. Ordinance 52-24, an ordinance authorizing the 2024 street paving and repairs project number 370, introduced by Councilmember Spianis. Okay, excellent. We are now complete with ordinance for second reading, and we will now move on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 53-24 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to take all steps necessary to join the Southeast Ohio Recycling Terminal, SORT, Council of Governments, COG, and to provide the annual dues payment. This is introduced by Member Claude Felter for all council members.
Whereas Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 167, authorizes certain political subdivisions to enter into an agreement to establish a Regional Council of Governments, or a COG, for the purposes of providing certain public services on a cooperative basis. And whereas Athens City Council has reviewed and considered a proposed agreement for the establishment of the Southeast Ohio Recycling Terminal, or SORT, Council of Governments, or COG agreement, for the purpose of managing solid waste through a regional approach to sustainability, building commonalities across regional communities, and giving members direct control over solid waste management, a copy of the COG agreement is attached hereto as Exhibit A. And whereas Athens City Council now desires to grant the mayor of the city of Athens authority to enter into the COG agreement as indicated below, be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1. Athens City Council hereby authorizes the mayor to submit a written request for admission as a member of the Southeast Ohio Recycling Terminal Council of Governments, and if accepted, to execute the COG agreement attached hereto as Exhibit A, along with the payment of $500 per year as required. A copy of the bylaws have been attached for purposes of reference. Section 2. This ordinance shall not financially obligate the City of Athens to contribute to the COG programs or services unless and until such financial contribution is approved by a separate ordinance. The mayor may decide to withdraw from the COG at their discretion. Section 3. Athens City Council hereby finds and determines that all formal actions taken relative to the passage of this ordinance were taken in an open meeting of the Athens City Council, and that all deliberations of this council and of its committees, if any, which resulted in formal action, were taken in meetings open to the public in full compliance with applicable legal requirements. Section 4. This ordinance shall be in effect in full force upon its passage and approval by the mayor. I move that we approve this ordinance.
That's just the first reading.
Oh, excuse me.
But thank you, Member Claude Felter.
Well, I am in favor.
Any questions or comments from council members? Member Swank?
Yeah, I have several, if you would indulge me. Section 2, it says the mayor may decide to withdraw from the COG at their discretion. And I guess this question is probably for the law director as much as anything. In the agreement, under Article 2D1, it says, "Any member wishing to withdraw from membership may do so by serving the president with a certified copy of a duly adopted resolution of the member's governing board." So in the ordinance, it says that the mayor can do this, but in the agreement, it says it would need to come from council. Do we need to clean that up?
I think we do, you're right. I did not notice that before.
Okay, so that's number one, again, if you'll indulge me here. Second question has to deal with costs. In the membership, or in the agreement, Article 2, B4, it says the entity must pay all dues and assessments. And in G2, it says council costs. One of the questions I've heard from the public on the COG, and I am very much supportive of this, of the formation of this COG, but what I've heard from the public is, what is it going to cost the city? So I guess, can someone address what are some possible assessments, and what do we mean by council costs?
I think those would be questions for the service safety director.
Okay. All right, and then I have a bunch here. I'll limit to 3, then I'll shut up and let other council members speak and come back later. In Article 2D1, it talks about if we were to withdraw at least 180 days before the end of this fiscal year, which means we would need to withdraw by July the 4th. What happens if we withdraw July the 6th? Does that mean we can't get out of this until the following fiscal year? What does that mean? The July 4th is 180 days before the end of the fiscal year.
And looking at it, I would agree with you that 180 days is what the agreement says, and if you don't withdraw by then you're responsible for another year.
So I would like maybe.
And that would be the $500 dues.
Yeah, exactly. So in essence, if we did it on July the 5th, that obligates us for 179 days plus 365. And if we're thinking about withdrawing, it's kind of like being stuck in a bad situation for longer than you want to be stuck in it. So I guess, and again, I'm fully supportive of the COG and the idea of a COG. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that in my mind. This is a big deal. And I think we need to get it right. So those last two, or all 3 of those questions are things I think before we get this too far down the road, we need answers to. And then I'll yield and come back later after other members of council have had an opportunity to chime in on things.
Are there other comments or questions from other members of council regarding the ordinance in question or the attached agreement? Member Thomas?
I'm just looking at what Member Swank is talking about. If you withdraw 180 days out, then at the end of the year, you're done. This just says you'd be required for the remainder of that year. If July 5th comes around and we went through, it's through the remainder of that fiscal year. Am I reading that incorrectly, or is there somewhere where it's saying you go the following year also?
I think from reading it, you're obligated for the following year.
Is it from the following year also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the word at least 180 days. And if we miss July the 4th, then we miss the deadline. It's kind of like, renewing a subscription on an app you bought on your phone. Once you get past that cancellation date, then you're obligated again.
I'll just note that I believe council is well aware that this agreement is an agreement currently entered into between the Athens Hawking Solid Waste District and the village of Amesville. So this is not the City of Athens's agreement with the COG or with the Solid Waste District. And so these questions will have to be brought to the authorities who created this agreement. Do I have that correct, Director Eliason?
The agreement, my understanding is the COG was formed and the agreement entered into between the Solid Waste District in Amesville. So yes, that would be the agreement that's in place between those parties, so.
So perhaps we could have Service Safety Director chime in on his thoughts on some of these changes, and we'll move forward from there. Council, yes, Member Spionis.
Yeah, this is the part that I have found a little bit puzzling all along is I'm concerned that each entity that might want to join would want to change some agreement. So how does that work? I mean, is this locked in stone and anybody who wants to join has to adhere to these? Or is there slightly different ones depending on who you are and you're, you know what I mean? I mean, I just want some clarification on how that's going to work.
These are all good questions. My understanding is that as a COG, they can decide to amend their agreement by vote. Given input from other entities that might want to join, but that will be a process to go through.
Just looking at, further down Article 5, I mean, it seems like you would join as is, knowing that you could go in with your representative and propose changes to bylaws like any other organization. But if you're not a founding member, you don't get to make the rules until you've joined and participate.
As I believe,
Bylaws are different than the agreement also.
Are they-
as I believe council is aware and the public is aware, is that Service Safety Director Stone, who was not able to be here, was on the negotiating committee where these very complicated agreement and bylaws were created. And so I do think it is our due diligence to speak with Mr. Stone first before moving forward. He may have answers to Mr. Swank and all of us that we don't have tonight in front of us. Yes, Member Swank.
In Article 6, I guess it should be A2. It's A, small letter B. This is for the auditor. Dues for all members shall be $500 per year and due on the first day of January each year. Is that workable?
Yes,
Okay,
budget and plan ahead. Yeah.
okay. And then the next one, and this might be another one for Director Stone, the council shall make an annual report of its activities to the members. When?
I think the council they're referring here to is the Council of Governments. It's going to make an annual report of its activities to the
Yes.
members.
Member
I
Swank
would
just
suppose
wants to
that
know
would be
when.
by January.
It doesn't say, just,
Well, an annual,
because I know with the economic development folks, we have a deadline or a date for that. I think we have one with Orca. I believe we have one with Tourism Bureau. And just a kind of a win. Under board membership, if I count this right, it says the board shall have no more than 15 members. But when you run the numbers on here, you only come up with 9. I'm on page 1 of 5 of the the bylaws. Cities shall have 1 representative per city. You have 3, Athens, Logan, and Nelsonville. Solid Waste District shall have 1 representative. There's 1 solid waste district. Villages shall have 1 representative for all villages per county. So you have Hocking County and Athens County, that's 2. Townships shall have 1 representative for all townships per county. Hocking County and Athens County, that's 2. Health departments shall have 1 representative for all health departments, that's 1. So 3, 1, 2, 2, and 1 is 9. Where's the 15 come from?
Says no more than,
Simply says it shall have no more than 15 members.
But why would you have no more than 15 when we've delineated you can only have 9?
well, if Athens joined, we would then add our numbers in. And if Washington County joined, they would add their numbers in.
Oh, so we could, so additional counties could join this? Okay. So it's additional counties. Okay.
Member McCary?
Yes, I just wanted to check to confirm that we benefited from some consultation with an attorney specifically gifted with expertise setting up COGS like this, and I wondered if that attorney is still on retainer or if that arrangement has ended.
I believe that the attorney we consulted with, the city did, I explained that I had a conflict because my husband was on the negotiating team. However, once all the agreement was put together and I did take a look at it, but we did have an attorney from Cleveland who was very experienced in Council of Governments. And I believe that Dean DePiro is his name, and I believe that we could probably consult with him again.
Thank you.
This is something, Council of Governments is a little bit outside our expertise in our office, and he worked on a Council of Governments for the Regional Transit Authority in Cleveland, so he knows quite a bit, and he's reviewed all of this. That was my understanding. And I looked it over once the negotiations were over. I looked through it, as did Jesse Branner-Hittel in our office, but Member Swank found found an inconsistency between the agreement and the ordinance, so.
Good to know that we could still potentially rely on
I
that.
think that we could, yes, if there were other questions, but these are questions I think that Member Swank had that Member Stone could answer as far as the specifics of the agreement, but the one that you stated, we can actually amend the ordinance to reflect the fact that we can only withdraw if council passes, we pass ordinances instead of resolutions to withdraw. So that can be fixed in the ordinance, but there's still a lot of things in there, as you said, some questions that only Member Stone, or only our Service Safety Director could answer.
Yes, I wasn't sure if potentially the difference between membership and then what was the word, Member Swank, that you identified as another potential cost assessments?
Yes.
And there might even be a third term that we saw in
Yeah,
there.
there were 3 or 4.
And if we can clarify
Right.
legally if those are, just to know what we're actually being asked to pay for.
Well, I think first we need to find out from Mr. Stone exactly what those are. He may have the answer to those questions. But if there's another legal issue that comes up, certainly we can consult with outside counsel.
Great.
I just have one last one.
Member Swank?
In the bylaws, number 7, Executive Director, the Director shall be the Chief Administrative Officer of the Southeast Ohio Recycling Terminal Council of Governments and will be appointed by the Board. The powers and duties of the Director are blah, 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 blah. Is this a hiring process? It says they will be appointed by the Board, but when you go back to the document, powers of the Board, nowhere is it listed that they have the power to hire. So does the bylaw statement there give them that power?
That's another good question. I think that's more of a legal question.
Yeah. So again, fully supportive of the concept of the COG and getting this done, but there seems to be, before we enter into an agreement as a council, and particularly to Member McCary's point about the various possible financial commitments, I think we have a lot of questions to be answered from a technical standpoint and also from a financial obligation standpoint of the city.
Any other comments or questions from council members?
Member Swank, do you have all your questions written down that we could pass those on to Mr. Stone?
I have the stuff on here. I'll have to go back and put them in question form, but I can get that to you in the next day or so.
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
City administration, anything to add to tonight's discussion? Community members, anything to add? Questions or comments? Please state your name and your address, and if you're here representing a group.
Kay Blythe, Morris Avenue, not representing a group. To Member Swank's point about the 180 days, I would also be curious to understand, knowing that entering the COG is not the same thing as contracting for services through the COG, if that 180 days would also potentially apply to any contracting for services. Understanding that this is probably a question for Mr. Stone, but wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
Actually, I think in that situation with a contract, a separate contract for services, there would be a statement in there as to when you could withdraw. Well, actually, at what point you could decide that you wanted to terminate the agreement. So that would be actually in the additional agreement, the contract, when you're contracting for the services.
Sure, thanks.
Any other comments from, please, thank you, Krista.
My name is Krista Cummings. I live in Amesville, and I am the Executive Director of Athens Hocking Recycling. I am now also the Secretary Treasurer of the Council of Governments. So kind of representing a couple of different roles here. I wanted to just start by saying that I think it's exciting that Athens City is considering joining the Southeast Ohio Recycling Terminal Council of Governments for recycling, compost, and waste services, which will help preserve the recycling infrastructure that was built around the city of Athens for the past 40 years. It continues a long history that Athens has as a recycling and sustainability leader in the state of Ohio. I really hope that the city of Athens will also contract for recycling, compost, and waste hauling with SORT, Council of Governments, by the end of this year in order to ensure SORT's viability. I also, obviously, you want to turn to Director Stone to answer most of those questions, but in terms of the 180-day withdrawal, I can give you why that number was chosen and why it's in the agreement and why it was agreed upon by the entire group. There was a lot of back and forth around that specific date, and it was to help provide stability to the operations of the Council of Governments. So there needs to be planning for about a year for the budgeting for any organization of the size that we're hoping the Council of Governments will be. So that was very intentional with the timing. And it was also partially set up with any member who wanted to withdraw and then potentially send contracts out to bid in the future. It has that timeline in mind. So that's how it was selected. Again, that's the $500 dues that you're looking at for that membership. Any contracts that you had with the Council of Governments for services would still be in effect after that withdrawal period. So that would be a separate action terminating those contracts early. And there's no specificity in the agreement or bylaws related to that. I feel like there was another question that I was gonna address. With the council costs, certainly the intent is primarily just that $500 dues. That said, the powers of a COG also can include things like feasibility assessments or that's the only one I guess I can think of. There was another one in my head a second ago. But say, for example, the city of Logan wanted to put in a glass recycling facility, then there could be additional fees that could come up around feasibility studies for things of that nature. And who would end up paying for those could be the COG, or it could be if there was a particular member of the COG that really wanted to see something done. I mean, Director Stone has mentioned, finding a better solution than landfilling biosolids from the solid waste, or from the wastewater treatment facility, and feasibility studies cost, somewhere around 25,000 generally, especially for something that is of that size. So those would be costs that would be incurred separate from operation costs. So that was the other thing that I wanted to address.
I'll just note that I turned off your timer because you are providing us with valuable information regarding the questions we had, so please, if you have more information.
Okay, I was watching it blink
Yeah.
and starting to get nervous, so. And in terms of the agreement being set in stone, so the bylaws have been filed with the state auditor. There is a provision in the agreement to review those every 3 years. They can be amended more than that, but there's you don't want to amend them regularly. The agreement could also presumably be altered, but all of the potential founding members have been included in those negotiations. And so we didn't move until we thought that there was consensus amongst the group. And it was unanimously voted in favor of for the agreement as it is written and the bylaws as they are written. So I think that was the last thing that I was going to bring up.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate your comments.
Can I ask a question? Council had a question about, under the section, members' rights and duties, if they pay dues, but then it says under 2, to be deemed a member in good standing, a member must have currently paid any fees, dues, and/or council costs due to the council. I think council was asking that question.
Yeah.
What that included, and we thought perhaps Mr. Stone would know that, but
I think
perhaps you
he
know that.
will, but also what that's specifically referencing is if a member is severely past due on the fees that are being charged for contracted services, that would also be considered not being a member in good standing. So if there was a feasibility study done and the member had not paid for their portion or for the feasibility study, or if they had not paid for contracted services or the dues. So that's what that's referring to.
But we pay the $500 as dues. And does it say in there that we have to pay for extra for a feasibility study then?
There is nothing in there about feasibility studies. That's just one of the things that I know is going to be potential assessed costs. So and that's specifically in there, again, in case there is a special project that a member organization wants to explore for their community or for the region as a whole.
Krista, this is so valuable. Thank you very much. Revisiting the whole issue of assessments and the scenario of a possible feasibility study, which I think is a good example that you chose. Do you see any possibility that a member organization might sort of get assessed for that when they weren't willing to pay for it? I mean, is there anything that would obligate one of the members to say, pay for a feasibility study for Logan to study the feasibility of recycling glass? Would Amesville and the Solid Waste District have to pay for that?
I mean, that certainly wasn't the intent. Whether this obligates that is a question that is beyond me.
Okay.
So it's definitely not the intent.
Okay. The way you intended it, if I understood you right, Logan would pay for the feasibility study of
I mean,
recycling glass?
to be honest, if it's a feasibility study, I feel fairly confident that we'll be able to get outside funding for those things. And so that will certainly be the intent. Being able to, so I think it would be, there may be things that member organizations, councils really want to see paid for, which would be fine, right? That can run through the Council of Governments. But paying for feasibility studies is something that you look towards grant funding and other funding sources for.
Member Swank?
You mentioned the word bid, I think. Athens, the city of Athens, currently has a contract for waste disposal, recycling, and composting that runs through June 30th of 2027. As we did this year, I would assume, Member Corral and I, or President Corral and I were involved in this for, I think, as long as it took to have a baby, it was about 9 months. We will probably start that process again, well before that June 30th, 2027 deadline. In view of Jane Redford's comments about a parcel fee and the amount of money that will generate and most likely allow the assets to be protected, would you envision the COG bidding on the next contract with Athens?
The hope is that the city of Athens and other regional governments would contract directly with the Council of Governments without bidding. I would say if instead those governments send it out to bid, it'll probably be a decision on the part of the board as a whole whether we would bid on those contracts or not. So it is possible that we would choose not to bid.
Because one of the benefits of a Council of Governments is to take advantage of economies of scale, whether it be gas aggregation, electric aggregation, or the like.
Correct.
So it just seems that, that it would be tough to enter into an agreement with an entity that hasn't provided a price through a bidding process to contract with them.
I mean, the price would be provided through fully transparent books and knowing exactly how every penny was being spent by the organization.
Okay, so there might not be a formal bid, but there would be a price sheet to look at.
For sure.
Okay, good. All right,
Yeah.
good. Fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you would see exactly where it's a public entity, so you would see exactly where all money was being spent by, through the budget with the Council of Governments. So every penny would be accounted for, any surplus would be well known.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Any other questions while we have Ms. Cummings here? We appreciate you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to ordinance 54-24. An ordinance rezoning properties located at 14, 20, 24, 30, 32, 34, and 36 Elliott Street from R3 residential multifamily zone to B1 neighborhood business zone, introduced by Councilmember Swank.
Okay, what President Crowell read pretty well sums up what we're talking about here. Elliott Street is the street that runs perpendicular to Stimson Avenue. They're at the gas station. If you're coming from the roundabout, make a left and you go down Elliott Street. The properties we're talking about are on the left side. One of the first things you come to is looks like a gas distribution facility. So it's the next set of properties, 3 or 4 houses, a couple lots, and then the large parking lot that's associated with Athens Machine and Mold. That is currently zoned R3, and the owner of the first properties, 30, 32, 34, 36, Mr. DeLuca, went to the board of, or went to the planning commission and asked to have that changed to multifamily or to a B1 neighborhood business zone. Mr. DeLuca very much in favor of this based on conversations. In fact, I talked with him last week, and he had asked if it could have been a different B, but he's fine with this, gives him the flexibility he wants. And I talked with Sam at Athens Molding Machine, and they're good with it too. So it's just a matter of rezoning. Now, because we're rezoning, well, we need to have a hearing on this.
Yes.
Okay. It is scheduled, okay. So that's what we're talking about, just changing the zoning. Mr. DeLuca is looking to put in some commercial stuff on the first floor, if he can. And this is all part of, and the mayor can correct me if I term this wrong, the Stimson Avenue Revitalization Project, which is going to extend in more than Stimson Avenue for that whole area.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from council members on this first reading? City administration? Members of the public, please.
Good evening, Paul Hillard, Morris Avenue. Just a quick, I guess, comment. You know, we've talked about the housing shortage in Athens, and if we rezone this to business and Mr. DeLuca develops it into a donut shop or a warehouse or something that you suggested, wouldn't that take beds out of Athens and limit the number of housing available if we put that commercial on the first floor? We already have an issue with that already, so I'd like to encourage council to think about that before we rezone residential areas for, yeah, you have a...
Mayor, want to respond to that?
So currently the only truly developable parcel is the middle parcel. There's a house on both sides, and then there's a vacant lot in between. And that was the lot that Mr. DeLuca was referencing as possibly putting in something in there. Rentals are permissible in a B1, so the current houses would basically continue to operate as they are right now. But, so we wouldn't be losing beds from those two units on the separate parcels.
It did sound like that when he described it. The one would be turned into a donut and then one into a warehouse. And I may have misinterpreted what he was trying to say.
No, there is that center green space in between the two parts. There's three parcels. And then the middle parcel is currently a grassy field.
I just wanted to think about that as we were switching zoning. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, additionally, you could also do what Kevin Goldsberry did up on Carpenter Street. On the first floor is the vape shop. Sat empty for 3 or 4 years, and then apartments all above that. So the same thing could happen over there on Elliott if the developer decided to do that.
But you'd lose the beds on the first floor if that was
You might have a net gain.
possible.
Yeah.
Just something to consider. Thank you.
Member Wood?
Yeah, this is for the Untitled Art Project, donut shop, whatever, but it's definitely a bar that we're talking about, right? For Mr. DeLuca, we're approving.
There's no bar in question. I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean, it could be anything, it could be whatever. We don't actually know what the project is for that we're approving.
Well, there's no project in front of the planning commission that's.
There is not. There is not. I have had communications with Mr. DeLuca, and because the communication was basically, there's more flexibility if this were to be B3, but there isn't that much more flexibility in his opinion. So, B1 but never has he mentioned a bar going in between the two houses that exist right there on Elliott Street.
Sure. But we don't actually, have any, anything other than something that he wants to do.
Is a bar considered nightlife, and is that only B3?
I'm sorry?
Is bar considered nightlife, and is that only B3 and B2D, or is that allowed in B1? I can't remember.
I'd have to double check on that, but I believe And I'll have to go back and do my homework on West Washington Street, or West State Street rather, at the intersection of State and Schaefer, whether that's B1 or B3 where the cider house exists, but I can get that answer for you. That's not too difficult to do.
Other comments or questions on this ordinance? Anything else from the public? Okay, thank you. Moving on, ordinance 55-24 is an ordinance rezoning undeveloped lots on Grand Park Boulevard and Eden Place from R2 residential, one-family, two-family zone to R3 residential, multifamily zone, introduced by Councilmember Swank.
This is the property that stretches from Grand Park on the west to Eden on the east, approximately 100 yards off East State Street. Currently, it's 5 undeveloped lots, and the intent is for Donwood Hyundai to put in a parking lot. Shouldn't say a parking lot, it's not gonna be a parking lot. It's gonna be a lot on which cars can be displayed, as opposed to a place that you and I would go park. It will be limited to about 60% of the available area. The purpose of this is to allow them to increase their inventory. You can only put so many, cars on the lot that they have now. And supposedly, to get the cars off of East State Street. Next week at the committee, we will be talking about a request for a variance to use the city's right-of-way for this property. Not the property in question, but the existing Donwood Hyundai dealership. I would request that we consider this first reading today, but also remember this next week in the conversation about granting the variance. And just to give you an idea of the seriousness with which the Far East Side Neighborhood Association is taking this, we are having an on-site meeting with Director Riggs at 9:45 Thursday to visually survey the safety of this. And this could have additional repercussions for that entire band of properties on East State Street for those cars trying to exit onto East State Street and having the visibility impaired or restricted.
Councilmember Swank, just so I can clarify, not this property we're under question tonight. That's
No.
not what you're reviewing. You're talking about the
Right.
variance on East State Street.
Yeah, but they are related because it
understand.
is the same business owner. But again, the Planning Commission recommended this, a lengthy discussion, and as it stands, if they ask for variance for this property above and beyond, then some of the things that the neighbors are concerned about, such as fencing and lights and so on and so forth, can be addressed by us, and we've been told that by the code office we can put those restrictions on. But right now, we're just asking to have this rezoned. And it also could be used, if they don't want to go to the parking lot, for multifamily housing. Getting back to a comment from the audience earlier, we could have multifamily housing in that area, which would fit fine. So, for first reading.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions on this ordinance? City administration? Public? Okay, it's been read for the first time. Ordinance 56-24 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 15-24, authorizing the Service Safety Director to close streets in the uptown area for special events during the 2024 calendar year, introduced by Councilmember Spielness.
Thank you, President Crowell. Okay, so as we've discussed in committee and because we have discussed and passed an ordinance, which we're doing annually now, so we don't have to do this every time somebody wants to do an event, we are just adding to the number of events that require street closures from vehicular traffic in Athens. And so this one we want to add is, that they want to add, is Juneteenth celebration East Union Street from Court to College, and that would be June 22nd. I want to point out that I did get a couple of questions about why it's June 22nd rather than Juneteenth, the actual Juneteenth date, which is the 19th. So I contacted Vanessa Morgan, who is in charge, the Assistant Director for Diversity and Inclusion Programs at Ohio University, and she explained that normally their Juneteenth celebration falls on a weekend to ensure optimal attendance. That doesn't surprise me. And although it's, the official date is June 19th, that's a Wednesday. So they decided to host it the following weekend rather than prior weekend because there were some conflicts. All makes sense to me, honestly. So that's the only addition to this previously passed ordinance. Otherwise, there has been no change.
Thank you, Member Spellis. Is there any comments or questions about this Juneteenth celebration closure, which I'm looking forward to, by the way? City Administration? Public? Okay, thank you. It's been read for the first time. Ordinance 57-24 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a 20-year lease agreement with the State of Ohio Department of Administrative Services to lease 8.334 acres located north of West State Street for proposed soccer fields. Introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Grell. I believe this will be a very popular ordinance, especially among our soccer community, who's been waiting for something like this for quite some time. Section 1 reads that subject to the approval of the Director of the Department of Administrative Services, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a 20-year lease agreement with a successive renewal of 5 years with the State of Ohio to lease 8.334 acres located north of West State Street, commencing May 1st, 2024 and expiring on May 30th, 2044. For proposed soccer fields, a copy of said agreement is attached hereto and incorporated herein for reference, or by reference. Section 2 indicates that this ordinance shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Thank you, Member McCary. And that would be expiring on April 30, 2044. Any comments or questions? Member Swank.
Question for our two soccer playing members. Has there been any discussion about, 'cause I was just down there the other day and the fields are still kind of tough, going with turf fields? The reason I ask, if you looked at the Columbus Dispatch on Sunday, or maybe, I think it was Sunday, or maybe Friday, there was a extensive article about a sports complex, much like what we're talking about here, being put in Delaware County, and it's going to be all turf. And I'm just wondering if there's been discussion of that.
I mean, among the league and people playing, lots of discussion. It's very expensive. It takes a lot of planning. It probably takes more space than we have. And turf is pretty hotly debated on how many ACLs you would like to tear if you're a woman player. There's pros and cons to it, I guess, and I'm sure that there's a space where turf would be really helpful in a pickup smaller entity. But I'm sure there are people who would love to see that somewhere, but not in that space right now.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. I just happened to see this article, kind of thinking about that.
Yeah.
Mayor?
I am not a soccer player, so let me qualify that up front. But with that particular space, even though we have corrected a smaller drainage issue over there, I think the last place you ever want to put turf would be in that location. You might as well think about putting turf down by Walmart on those fields. The reality is climate change is real. Flash flood events are happening more and more frequently, and I have been down there to observe, Dalton Field being underwater during that event. And if you've got turf down there, you might as well just watch that float away as one big large carpet. Because that's what would happen. It would wash away the rubberized aggregate underneath it. Unadvisable. I like the intent.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I wasn't advocating for that. I just
Other comments or questions on this ordinance? Anything to add from the city administration or the public? Where there's more than one soccer player in the room. Okay. Moving on to ordinance 58-24, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of soccer netting, actually golf ball soccer netting, as part of the West State Park Soccer Fields, project number 355, introduced by Councilmember McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. Yes, again, pertaining to soccer, whereas the soccer field safety netting is being purchased through Sourcewell, a cooperative purchasing program, and competitive bidding is not required, and whereas the administration has already made several expenditures toward the project on surveying, design, storm sewer, and drainage improvements, be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, the 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 130-23 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance following sums: $41,000 to APR Income Tax Fund 273 and $100,000 to Capital Improvements Fund 580.270 for soccer field safety netting and increasing the total appropriations by said amounts. Section 2 reads that the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to expend up to $340,000 as follows: $270,900 from APR Income Tax Fund 273, $23,800 from APR Income Tax Fund 273, $8,300 from Recreation Fund 270, and $100,000 from Capital Improvement Fund 580.270 for project number 355. Finally, Section 3 reads that the ordinance shall be in effect in full force upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Thank you, Member McCary. Any comments or questions on ordinance 58-24? City administration, members of the public. Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 59-24. An ordinance amending section 22A1 of ordinance 132-23, the 2024 fringe benefits package for non-union personnel within the city of Athens. Introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Member Wood, are you able to speak to this?
You'd like me to read it?
Sure.
59-24 is an ordinance amending section 22A1 of ordinance 132-23. The 2024 fringe benefits package for non-union personnel within the city of Athens. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Athens, Ohio. Section 22 of ordinance 132-23, the fringe benefits package for non-union personnel is hereby amended to read as follows: promotion, lateral transfer, and demotion of new hires and current employees. Employees who transfer from a bargaining unit to a non-bargaining unit classification or from one of the non-bargaining unit to another bargaining unit classification will be slaughtered in accordance with the following provisions. Upon promotion, lateral transfer, or demotion, the date of placement in the new classification becomes the new employee's classification date. Promotion is defined as the movement of the employee to the new classification in the higher pay grade. A full-time, three-quarter time, or permanent part-time employee's new pay rate shall be the greater of the minimum of the new pay grade or 10% higher than the rate from which the employee was promoted. At the request of the appointing authority, the promoted employee's new pay rate may be set at the rate of up to 25% through the new pay grade and shall be contingent upon the employee's qualifications, education, and experience. Approval by the City Council is required for any additional movement through a pay grade. However, no promoting employee shall be assigned to a rate higher than the maximum rate of the employee's newly assigned pay grade. Section 2, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment permitted by the law upon its passage and approval by the mayor.
Thank you,
His
Member
next
Wood.
job is auctioneer.
Agreed.
I did as requested, sir.
Thank you. So this is to, this was, as we heard from Director Lucas at committee meetings, this is to rectify some of the language for the non-union fringe benefits package in order to be able to hire within the same way that we're able to hire outside. Does the city administration want to add anything to that?
No, other than Councilmember Wood, that was impressive. Thought I was listening to an ad on the radio. trailer. No, I think you summed it up really well. This is just aligning a transfer from within to where someone's taking on a new position and a new pay grade currently administration's hands are tied in terms of where that person's start point can be and how far into that pay grade versus hiring someone new to where based on their qualifications and skill sets that we could go as high as 25% into the pay grade. And as council recognizes that if it were, even a request that for over that, it would go before council. Council could determine whether or not to hire someone between the 25.1% and 50% into the pay grade.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments from the public? Okay, Member Wood, I'll just give you a heads up that we were also hoping the next two you could read on behalf of the Finance and Personnel Committee, since Member Reisner is not here. Ordinance 60-24 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 28-24, correcting the transfer amount needed to make an interfund transfer. It's introduced by Councilmember Reisner and now hopefully by Member Wood.
These are short.
Be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 2 of Ordinance 2824 is hereby amended to read as follows. Section 2, the 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 103-23 is further amended by decreasing ARPA Fund 286 TC 500 by 160,432 and 70 cents. And increasing the ARPA Fund 286 TC 600 for transfer by the same amount, and increasing and decreasing said appropriations by said amount. Ordinance will be in full effect upon passage of the mayor. Numbers aren't in the skill set.
Thank you, Member Wood. Comments or questions from council members on this ordinance? City administration, anything to add? Public? Okay, thank you. And finally, or not finally, but we also have Ordinance 61-24, an ordinance amending the 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 130-23, introduced by Councilmember Reisner and Member Wood.
Yeah, be it ordained by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, the 2024 Appropriation Ordinance 130-23 is hereby amended by appropriating for the unappropriated balance of the sum of $9,000 to the Garbage Fund 760 TC 300 to cover administrative fees and increasing the total appropriations by said amount. This ordinance will be in full effect to passage by approval by the mayor.
As discussed at the committee, this was just rectifying where that all the funds are paying those administrative fees. Any questions from City Council regarding this ordinance? Members of the administration and the public? Okay, thank you. It has been read the first time. Now we do have the the additional ordinance that Member Swank amended the agenda at the beginning of the evening. This is Ordinance 62-24, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to advertise and accept bids where necessary and enter into contracts for the Woods Edge Infrastructure Project at University Estates, introduced by Member Swank.
Okay, for those of you of a certain age, I did not take the Evelyn Wood speed reading courses when I was in school. That was pretty neat. I will read the three whereases here, though, just to put this in context. Whereas Ordinance 103-20 authorizes a tax increment financing agreement, known as a TIF, as part of the creation of University Estates Incentive District within the City of Athens, and was subsequently amended by Ordinance 42-21 to consider changes to the Affordable Housing Commission goals. And whereas the developer has informed the city that it is no longer able to pay costs of public infrastructure improvements up front with reimbursements derived from the TIF revenue, and whereas the City Council understands the availability of TIF revenue to the city is dependent on the developer's completion of the project, be it ordained by the Council, City of Athens, Ohio, Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to advertise and accept bids where necessary and enter into a contract with the lowest and best bidder at the Woods Edge Infrastructure Project at University Estates. The money will come $700,000 from the street fund, $675,000 from the water fund, and $625,000 from the sewer fund. Section 4, which is extremely important. Furthermore, the Service Safety Director shall not award a contract for said infrastructure construction until City Council has adopted an amended TIF agreement. And that safeguard is addressing many of the questions and concerns raised by members of council as to the various what-ifs that we could think about. And hopefully at the second reading, if we have additional comments or questions about that as we shepherd this through, that we can ask those of Director Stone.
Thank you, Member Swank. Any comments or questions from council on this ordinance? Members of the city administration, to add, public? Okay, 62-24 has been read for the first time. We are now moving on to announcements and other business. We have a number of confirmations of appointments and reappointments to various boards and commissions. The first are to confirm mayor's appointments. I believe there are 3 to the Recreation Advisory Board. Member Swank, will you?
Members of council, you've all seen in your packet the questionnaire application that each of these people individuals have filled out for inclusion on the Recreation Advisory Board. Those were submitted to the current Recreation Advisory Board, reviewed, and then forwarded to the mayor with comment and recommendation. And it's today that we will be acting upon this. Upon the mayor's recommendation, I would like to move that we approve the appointment of Emily Guzman, Heather Jolly, and John Leidy to the Recreation Advisory Board.
Second.
Quick point of order for the clerk or the law director. Can we do all 3 of these in one lump, or
They're
should we
all
do
to
them
the same-
separately? Same board, you can
Yes,
do them
that's
together.
fine.
Okay. Sorry. First, we have a motion and a second to appoint these 3 applicants to the Recreation Advisory Board. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Member Spilnis.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. 3 seems like a lot of change, considering there's only 7, if I read it correctly, members. Were these all people who dropped out, or were these people who were their end of term, or what happened?
One was end of term, one was change in employment, and one found it too much for their schedule.
Okay, just want to get a perspective. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? City administration and public, all those in favor of appointing Emily Guzman, Heather Jolly, and John Leighty to the Recreation Advisory Board signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Congratulations, they are appointed to the Recreation Advisory Board. The next item under announcements and other business is to confirm the mayor's reappointment to the Commission on Disabilities, and this will be handled by Member McCary.
Thank you, President Crowell. As City Council's liaison to the Commission on Disabilities, I am pleased to suggest the reappointment of 2 members, Allison Hughes and Lisa Simpson, both who have 3-year terms expiring at the end of this would be for 3-year terms expiring December 31st, 2026. They are both current members who have made outstanding contributions to the Commission. I've been pleased to work with them. Allison Hughes is an assistant professor, Department of Primary Care at The Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine, and Lisa Simpson is a program manager at HAVAR, and both have recently been involved in Commission activities such as the Walk, Talk, Enroll program that happened this spring.
Thank you, Member McCary. Any questions or comments on these 2 reappointments to the Disabilities Commission? City administration, public? Oh, was there a second?
Second.
Thanks.
Thank you, clerk. All those in favor of these 2 appointments to the Commission on Disabilities signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. They are reappointed to the Commission on Disabilities. The next item is to confirm the mayor's reappointments to the Historic Preservation Board, and Member Thomas is going to handle this.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest a motion for the reappointment of Cyrus Moore and Mark Snyder both to 4-year terms expiring Cyrus Moore on June 9th, 2028, and Mark Snyder, August 3rd, 2028.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to confirm the mayor's reappointments to the Historic Preservation Board. Any comments or questions on these two reappointments? City administration, public? Okay, all those in favor of these reappointments to the Historic Preservation Board signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. They are reappointed. And our final item under announcements and other business is to confirm the mayor's reappointments to the Municipal Arts Commission. Member Reisner is our liaison to the Municipal Arts Commission, but I've asked Member Thomas to handle this.
All right. I would like to make a motion to reappoint Kelly Reesbeck for a 3-year term ending in April 18th, 2027, and Holly Idle for a 3-year term ending in May 17th, 2027.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to confirm the mayor's reappointments to the Municipal Arts Commission. Are there any comments or questions on these very qualified people? City administration, yes, Mayor?
I would just like to state that for these reappointments, all these individuals have done outstanding work in their respective commissions. The other thing I want to share with council is that the Recreation Advisory Board, as well as the Commission on Disabilities, are two commissions or boards that start the process of finding either new board members, well, I'll just leave it there. It's finding new board members to serve on those boards. Those councils or commissions, they start that vetting process on their own, and then they bring forward to me a list of candidates that they have already viewed as being acceptable to be on the board. I still have the final decision-making of that list, however long that list may be, but it's great to see a board and a commission that both take it upon themselves to find people who are willing to serve. It certainly makes my job easier because it used to be me that would have to sit there and get on the phone and start calling everyone I could dream up that might want to serve on these boards or commissions. So just to me, that is working well and should serve as a best practice for looking for members newly appointed or otherwise for any of the council-appointed boards or commissions. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mayor. Any comments or questions from the audience? Oh, yes, please.
Thank you. Just on the topic of best practices when it comes to our boards and commissions, I do recall that under President Nisley's, former President Nisley's leadership, we began a practice of bringing members of boards and commissions together to hear a little bit from city leadership about the importance of their service, and it was a bit of an orientation. I don't recall how recently that last happened, but I'm wondering if that tradition can carry over into this current year. Does anyone have any information about bringing members of boards and commissions together?
Yeah, we started doing that actually when I became mayor, to sit and go, let's bring boards and commissions together. We've done it twice now, I believe. They're difficult to pull together, but we will continue to work on making that happen. It might be, every other year because of the scope of work that goes into coordinating and getting the various boards and commissions to come together. But it's been successful. Everyone that has attended those have found them very helpful, and that in a lot of cases they didn't know that some of these other boards and commissions even existed. So we'll keep working on that. Again, it's been successful. The comments that we received have been all positive in terms of how we've been able to pull all the boards and as many members of the boards and commissions and councils together as possible.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Good question. Any other comments or questions? That's a good question. Did we vote on this last appointment? Okay, good. Okay, we now have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that are not covered on tonight's agenda. Would anyone like to speak? I'd like to thank our loyal attendees for being here tonight and participating. We really appreciate you. We are adjourned. Thank you at 9:34 p.m.